Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great, as I always say, following the 3 H's of the channel and all that good stuff. And in this video, it's all about Washington. So, if that sounds like something you're interested in, definitely pull up a stump with me, and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. I live in Washington, and about a week ago, myself and my dog saw some kind of elf or gnome or little person thing. I don't quite know what to call it. I live in a small town, fairly close to Mount Rainier. The main source of jobs is logging, and the whole town is surrounded by warehouse or tree farms. Now, I don't get home from work until pretty long after dark, so it was about 10:30 p.m. when I took my dog on our nightly walk. We were doing our normal route when we were coming back along Main Street, passing the gas station. It's also a small engine repair or something, but he started growling. I look in the direction that he is indicating, and there was this thing, a tiny human-shaped figure, illuminated in the bluish glow from the metal porch light. It was slightly shorter than the tire of the trailer it was standing next to. Once it realized that I saw it, it did this exaggerated slow-motion run toward the other side of the trailer, and it vanished mid-step. This was my first ever, I think, paranormal experience. I honestly don't know what to make of it. My girlfriend doesn't believe me and said that it was probably a raccoon, but it obviously wasn't a raccoon. It was literally a regular person, but shrunk down. All the proportions and everything remained the same. It was so weird. There's a family story that we have that I'm a part of, so I'll tell it like we always tell it. This is about the Catman, not a dog man, a Catman. Our story begins in the year 1999 when my Uncle Bob, his wife, and 2 children moved from Union Gap to Tampico, or Yakima, Washington. Nothing specific in the beginning was ever brought to any of our attention, but it was known that the area was strange. I was pretty young at the time, so there's not a lot I remember outside of the event of which I'll speak. The event in which I speak is our dealing with what was dubbed the Catman. It was on an oasis up the road, around the corner, and down some more. The oasis was surrounded by the thickest brush imaginable. To this day, I had never seen anything like it. Cows would go missing, like the entire cow. Sometimes bits would appear around the pond, as well as a great many other bones, bits of clothing, stuff like that. But these cow and sometimes horse parts would sometimes be as far as miles and a half away from their pastures. For those not aware, cougars will only drag prey a few hundred meters tops before feasting and then leaving what's left for predators. Anywho, it had been long known that this area was evil. Immigrants from other countries working for cash would go missing with no trace, and there wouldn't be a search because a lot of these people didn't exist in this country officially. But getting to the bread and butter, my older brother and our 4 cousins heard about this thing, and we decided one night we were going to perform a community service and go kill this thing. My older cousins were 16 or so on average, so we weren't granted permission to take any firearms. Instead, we bolted butcher knives to axe handles and also made these makeshift spear things. Looking back, I don't exactly remember what we thought we were going to do, but I was pretty young and I wanted to go, so my Uncle Bob came along too, and in case anything actually happened, Bob had a sidearm. Because if you didn't know, wandering around this area unarmed isn't exactly advised. So we walk out to this place, and as we approach the oasis, there's this massive temperature drop. I don't know how many degrees, but it felt like 20. When we get to around 60 feet before the fence surrounding the oasis, my uncle orders me to stay back, but he allows the others to approach. I suppose he feels like they can handle themselves and probably won't find anything. Gary, Jake, Thomas, the older three, crossed the fence and approached the thicket wall. I mean, a linebacker couldn't tackle his way through this, and it would take several hours with a saw just to get into it. The other two, my brother and cousin Andy, stayed on the road. Right as the older three got to the tree line, we heard what sounded like a tornado blowing through the trees. The wall of brush opened up, and we had no lights, so there was a lot of shadows, but something jumped out of the impenetrable wall. My uncle shouted, "Run," and essentially picked me up and ran with me under his arm, almost a mile back to the house. Before the elder three cousins broke and ran, Thomas and Jake threw their makeshift spears and stuck the thing. And essentially, all this did was just piss it off. The long and short of what happened is that Thomas and Gary cut back to the road and caught up with Trevor and Andy, who eventually caught up with me and Uncle Bob. Jake took a straight right and cut through the orchards and pastures, with the thing hot on his heels. It followed him all the way back to the house. It stayed there on the hillside for a while, and eventually came down to the house and was behind a shed for a bit. All I genuinely remember seeing is this big, hulking mass. Its eyes did that shimmer thing that a cat's eyes do at night. It had tall ears with tips on it, and we called it the Catman, not because of its hulking mass alone, but because of the fact it could stand up. The whole situation at the time was awful and terrifying, but since then, it's been many, many years. It's basically a campfire story for us at this point. I don't feel like sleeping tonight, so why not? It was around November of 2013 in Washington State. At the time, I was new to the area. I was really enjoying the woods, so a few friends of mine that I had made recently that were also big into camping and hiking and kind of going off the grid, we all decided to go out to this secluded spot way out in the forest. They knew the spot, I didn't. So I thought, what the hell, I'll do it. I needed some time away from work anyways. Ever since I moved here, I've been working my ass off. So, I got the weekend off. I packed my bag, cleaned my rifle, and head over to my friend's house. It ends up being about 20 or 30 miles from the Canadian border, and this forest that just goes on forever. I'm really digging it because my home state doesn't have anything close to this. There's 6 of us and 2 dogs, a Labrador and a Rottweiler. Each person also has either some kind of hunting rifle or a shotgun. Except for me, I just have the rifle. So we parked the cars on this tiny game warden trail or border patrol dirt road or whatever it was, and we hiked about 4 miles into the woods. By this time, It's already starting to get a little dark, 'cause it is November after all. We decide to build a fire right off so we can get that out of the way and set up our tents. Two of the group and one of the dogs go out to gather wood while the rest of us start setting up the tent. It's one of those huge-ass 6 to 8 person ones. November gets cold up here. The tents are set up in about 15 minutes, and the trio still aren't back yet. We think, they must be making out with each other or something, because they were always super sensitive about that, so we tormented them about it all the time. So we just said screw it, and we started one from branches that were just around the site. And then we start hearing crashing noises that are headed our way, like somebody running their asses off. The two guys come barreling through. They're both wide-eyed. The dog is gone. They start yammering on about seeing one of us out in the woods acting weird, so they started trying to get close. Every time they get close, though, the person would somehow still be ahead of them. They said at one point he just disappeared, and then popped up 10 feet behind them. He also mentioned that there was the smell of spoiled milk popped up like it was on his clothes. They tried asking what was up, what he got into. He didn't answer. And then he just took off, like sprinting into the woods. The dog took off after him, barking its head off. The two dudes take off after the dog. Very quickly, they lose both the guy and the dog, and the smell starts disappearing as well. And then, far off, they hear a weird screech, followed by growling, and then another screech, and then a loud dog's yelp. And then everything got real quiet, real quick. And then this weird giggling started coming from different directions. They obviously turned tail and ran back to the camp. They get really pissed at the guy, asking him how the hell he got back to camp before they did. But all of us that were there vouched for him. So pretty soon, we're all weirded out. But I think, in my heart of hearts, that it was just a really screwed up joke. After a few moments of silence, I bring this up and say, okay guys, I know I'm new, but, this isn't funny anymore. And then I get yelled at. One guy says, well then where the hell's the dog then? If this is so fake, where's my dog? And that's honestly a good point. I hadn't really thought that through. At this point too, the sun was already well on its way down, so we build the fire up and bring out some Coleman lanterns as well. All of us are huddled around the fire, eating MREs. They were made by us, obviously. It's pretty tense. We all have our guns within reach. All is quiet until just after dark. The other dog starts growling, perks up, and it's that really aggressive growl that dogs do when they actually mean business. The dog starts sniffing the air like it can smell something that we can't. And then that spoiled milk smell just hangs in the air. The other guys were not wrong about it. I have smelled rotten deer carcasses that smelled fresher than this. And then this groaning sound starts up. You can hear branches and leaves cracking out and about the perimeter of our camp, but never coming in the light. The feeling of anxiety intensifies all around. The dog is going ballistic now. One of the guys with a shotgun, Greg is his name, stands up and fires off 3 rounds of buckshot into the woods in the direction that the dog is freaking out in. This hellacious scream comes out of the woods, and we hear whatever it is moving away from us fast as hell. We wait about an hour, and then we decide that it's too dark to hike back right now. We have to stay here until dawn. We decide to try and get some sleep, but 2 people will be on guard at all times. The first watch is me and another of the guys, Victor. The dog is chilling around the fire as well. Our 2 hours are up. Nothing has happened. We wake up Greg and Tom for their turn. We're asleep for a little bit, and then Greg starts yelling his head off, so we get up and head outside. Greg is looking around the edge of the woods with a spotlight, calling out Tom's name. We ask him what happened. They had been sitting there when they heard one of the guys from earlier calling out from the woods. The dog started growling and rushed the spot. Tom followed after, trying to get the dog to come back. But the dog has went through some bushes and he'd lost him, so Tom followed it into the woods. Greg had been yelling for him when he heard Tom begin to say something before he was cut off. And we think, shit, we can't leave him out there. So we all put on our clothes, grab flashlights, and grab our guns and head out. But this time, that awful smell was everywhere, and it was making most of us rather nauseous, especially with the anxiety of the situation. But we kept going because we wanted to find Tom. We find some of his tracks, but we lose the trail when they just mysteriously stop. Like literally no other footprints, and there's also none leading back the way he would come out of the woods back to the camp. One of the guys in the back begins shining his light around. He kind of stops and makes an oh shit noise, then starts yelling, "You effing dick, we've been worried sick about you." The rest of the group walks over to look, and there's Tom, standing a good 20 feet away, but he's standing a bit lopsided. We say, "You okay, buddy? You need some help?" He just stands there, deadpan, and then nods yes. A few of us walk over and put an arm around his shoulders to kind of support him, but we notice that he reeks of body odor. And we say, as a joke to break the mood, "Dude, we haven't even been out here a full day, and you smell like B.O." We all laugh to break the tension, except for him. We think nothing of this because we worry that he may have hit his head. We're back at the camp. We try and lay him down, but he won't. So we let him just stay outside at the fire. A couple of us go to sleep, but Greg, Vic, and myself decide to stay up to keep an eye on Tom. We're watching him. Every now and then, he'll do like this weird muscle spasm thing every now and then. It's super creepy, but we think it could be something serious. Again, we're still thinking that he hit his head. He's mostly quiet, very slow to respond to things. That is, until it comes to food. We give him one of the remaining MREs to eat, and he only eats the meat out of it. We shrug this off as whatever, and then he gets up and starts walking around the campsite. He keeps looking toward the woods, and he's a little jerky, but he seems to be okay. He asks us if we want to come into the woods with him for firewood. Besides the fact it's pitch black out, besides the fire and this huge stack of firewood we'd already collected on the way back, not all that weird. We tell him that we have lots of firewood and we don't need to go into the woods. He does this weird shrug thing before grinning and then running off into the woods. At this point, we're on full guard. We don't try to stop him. A few minutes later, Greg gets up later to step into the tent for something, so I'm outside with Vic when things get real quiet. They had been quiet before, but this was more than usual, like somebody hit the mute button. I get that pit in my stomach all at once. I gag hard. Then we start hearing that giggling from before. I've never been more terrified in my life, and you can tell that Vic is feeling the same way. Greg comes out in time to hear it really well, then goes inside to wake everybody up. Then he freezes at the tent flap, starts cursing, which wakes everybody up as it is. I don't know why he's cussing, but it's working. When they're all up and awake, he counts everyone, and he turns white. We say, "What's up, dude?" Apparently, while he was inside, he did a quick body count. There were 4 bodies inside. Someone or something had been chilling in our tent without us realizing it. It had gotten in. At this point, there's a little bit of chaos. People are trying to figure out how the hell we let this happen. How the hell this thing got into our tent without us seeing. And then everyone starts asking where Tom is. And while this is going on, that giggling and stuff is getting louder, and you can hear a bunch of branches being broken in the woods, something moving around. And then we hear Tom's voice calling at us from out in the woods to help him, but it's all wrong. And every now and then he'd say, "Help me," and then start giggling. We build the fire up as high as we can. We sit around it with all the lanterns on full, weapons in hand, until the sun starts coming up. As soon as it's up enough to see, we put the fire out, pack our stuff, and make for the vehicles. On the path back, we find the 2 dogs. I don't have to really say in what shape we found them in for you to understand, but it was in pretty rough shape. It was like they had been left there for us to find, because as soon as we were kind of saying our goodbyes and mourning them, the giggling returned. So we started noping hard back to the cars. We get there, and there's scratches all over them. All the windows are smashed out. The seats are ripped to shreds. But whatever, that stuff's not important. We just need them to run. We put the keys into the ignitions, and we hear the sweet, glorious sound of an internal combustion engine start up. We get our stuff in these cars, we get in, and we speed the hell out of there. Once we got back, a couple of the guys threw themselves into their work. Some of the other ones didn't want to talk about it, so we didn't meet up for a few months. But one time, I was talking to one of the other guys who had been Tom's friend. He said that while we were throwing everything in the cars, he could see Tom's coat just sticking out of the woods. And as he was watching it, he saw Tom step out of the woods, but he had the creepiest and most vile grin on his face. And to be honest, I believe him. I don't think I'm going to go camping for a long time, and if I do, it'll be on a regular campground with a lot more than 6 people. This was my first run-in with the Goat Man. I have a second one, but that's shorter and not in Washington. So, until then. So, what you think of those? Let me know which one was your favorite one down in the comments. Do you have one of your own? I have an email in the description that you can send them to if you want to. Also in the description is a PayPal and a Patreon if you would like to support the channel that way. A way to do it here on YouTube is with the super thanks button. But as always, just watching the video, liking the video, and commenting is amazing too. And with that, if you want to see like a certain state or a certain country, then drop it in the comment below and I'll take a look at it and see what I can do. But yeah, with that, I think I will see you in the next one. I hope y'all had a good week, a good weekend, and yeah, thank you for pulling up a stump.